My husband used to smile when he said it, like it was a gift he was giving me. Don't worry about the money. Sometimes he'd say it while signing checks at the kitchen table. Sometimes while scrolling through numbers on his laptop late at night. Sometimes while kissing my temple before heading out the door in the morning. Always calm. Always confident. And I believed him. Why wouldn't I? Mark had been good with money since college. He balanced checkbooks for fun. Read financial news the way other people read novels. Talked about compound interest like it was a love language. When we got married, it felt natural, logical even, that he'd handle the finances. I trusted him. I trusted the man who remembered my coffee order, who showed up early to every school recital, who rubbed my back when I couldn't sleep. Trust didn't feel like a risk, it felt like love. For 32 years our life ran on that trust. Bills were paid, vacations happened, the house got refinanced once, then paid off. He'd reassure me whenever I asked questions. Everything's fine, he'd say. Better than fine. We're set. So when he collapsed one Tuesday morning on his way to work, money wasn't even a thought. I was thinking about the laundry I hadn't folded. The soup cooling on the stove. The way he'd forgotten his lunch on the counter. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and grief. A doctor with tired eyes told me the words I understand until days later. Sudden cardiac arrest. No suffering. Nothing they could do. I nodded like I understood. I thanked him for trying. I called our children. I sat in a plastic chair and waited for something inside me to break open. It did not then. The funeral passed in a blur of black coats and murmured condolences. People said Mark had been a good man, a provider. I agreed with them because I still believed it. The first crack came a week later. It was small. A letter from the bank. A polite notice about a missed payment. I remember laughing softly to myself, thinking it was a mistake. Mark never missed payments. Ever. I called the number listed. The woman on the line was pleasant, efficient. She verified my identity, paused, then said, "Mom, this account is past due by 4 months." 4 months. I told her there had to be an error. She asked if I wanted to make a payment. "I don't even know what this account is," I said. There was another pause. "It's a credit line opened under your name." That was the moment the room felt like it tilted. I hung up and went to Mark's office. The room he'd always kept locked. Not because he was hiding anything he'd said, but because he liked order. Privacy. His desk was immaculate, files stacked neatly. Passwords written in his tidy handwriting on a yellow notepad. I didn't recognize half the accounts I found. Numbers blurred together. Statements overlapped. Words like balance due and past due and delinquent repeated themselves like accusations. I told myself it was grief. That I was overwhelmed. That Mark would have explained it all if he were here. But Mark wasn't here. And I was still standing. I spent the next 3 days making phone calls. Banks. Credit card companies. Mortgage lenders. Each conversation peeled away another of the life I thought I'd lived. There were loans I hadn't signed. Cards I'd never used. Accounts I'd never seen. All in my name. By the end of the week, I understood the truth I didn't want. My husband hadn't protected me from the money. He'd hidden it from me. Or worse, he'd used me. I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by papers, my hands shaking, my chest tight. 32 years of marriage replayed in my mind like a montage I no longer trusted. The vacations, the holidays. The easy confidence with which he'd say, "We're fine." We weren't fine, we were drowning. The letter came 2 days later. Handwritten. Mark's handwriting dated a week before his death. I didn't want to open it. I knew. Somehow that once I did, there would be no going back. But I opened it anyway. He wrote he'd made a mistake. That he'd tried to fix it. That he never meant for me to find out like this. That he loved me. That he was sorry. He didn't say how long he'd been lying. He didn't say why he never told me. He didn't say why my name was on debts I didn't recognize. He said he wanted to protect me. I folded the letter slowly and placed it back on the table. Protection doesn't look like this. Protection doesn't ruin someone's credit, their safety, their future. Protection doesn't your wife sitting alone in a quiet house, wondering which parts of her life were real and which were just managed illusions. When our son came over that night, I showed him everything. He read in silence, his jaw tightening with every page. "Mom," he said finally, "this is bad. Do you know how bad?" I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the fear he was trying to hide. "Worse than you think," I said. He wanted to fix it, to call lawyers, to confront banks. To undo what his father had done. I wanted to scream, instead I made tea. Anger didn't come all at once. It arrived in at first. Then sharp, then overwhelming. It surprised me how tangled it was with grief. How I could miss Mark so deeply while also feeling betrayed beyond words. I loved him. And he broke me. Those two truths sat side by side, and neither cancelled the other out. The lawyer I eventually hired listened without judgment. She used words I hadn't allowed myself to say yet. Fraud. Identity theft, financial abuse. Abuse. I never thought of myself as someone who could be abused. I hadn't been hit. I hadn't been yelled at. I hadn't been controlled in obvious ways. But control doesn't always raise its voice. Sometimes it smiles and says, "Don't worry, I've got this." The court process was long. Exhausting. Humiliating in ways I hadn't expected. I had to explain again and again how I hadn't known. How I'd trusted. How love had made me complacent. Some people believed me. Some didn't. One banker asked why I hadn't paid closer attention. A creditor implied I must have benefited somehow. A distant relative told me should be grateful. Mark meant well. I stopped explaining myself to anyone who wasn't listening. The house almost went into foreclosure. The credit cards nearly swallowed me whole. I took a part-time job at an age when I'd thought my working years were behind me. I learned how to read statements, how to ask questions, how to sit across from professionals and say, "Show me." Slowly, painfully, things shifted. Debts were removed, accounts closed, lies untangled. But something else changed too. I stopped missing the man I thought Mark was. I started seeing him for who he actually had been. Someone capable of love and selfishness at the same time. Someone who chose secrecy over honesty. Control over partnership. I didn't forgive him. Not in the way people expect. But I let go. On the day the judge ruled in my favor, releasing me from the dark had taken in my name, I didn't cry. I didn't smile either, I just breathed. For the first time since his death, I felt solid. Later that night, alone in the house, I went into his office one last time. I opened the drawers, cleared the desk, packed away the remnants of a life built on numbers and silence. On the empty desk, I placed one thing. The letter he'd written. Then I closed the door. I still miss him sometimes. Or maybe I miss the version of him I believed in. The man who made me feel safe without realizing he was slowly dismantling that safety behind my back. But I don't miss being in the dark. I don't miss not knowing. And I will never again confuse love with silence. If someone tells you not to worry about the money, ask why. If someone insists on handling everything, ask to see it. Because trust isn't about letting go of your power. It's about sharing it. And when that balance is broken, the cost is more than financial. It costs you yourself. I didn't tell anyone for a long time about the dreams. In them, Mark was always calm. Always reasonable. He stood in doorways or sat across from me at the kitchen table. The way he used to on Sunday mornings with the paper spread out and coffee cooling beside him. He'd look at me with that familiar patience and say, "You're overreacting. It's not as bad as you think." I would wake up with my heart racing, my mouth dry, my hands clenched into fists beneath the blanket. For weeks after the ruling, I moved through my days like someone learning how to use their body again. Ordinary things felt strange. Paying bills myself. Logging into accounts with passwords I'd chosen. Sending my name knowing it meant something again. There was grief in that too. A quieter grief. The loss of the life I'd assumed would simply continue on autopilot. Retirement trips we'd planned. Afternoons we'd imagined spending without worry. Now every decision required attention, presence, effort. Freedom I was learning wasn't light, it was heavy, but it was honest. The calls from creditors slowed. Then stopped. My lawyer sent one final email confirming the last account had been cleared. I stared at the screen for a long time after reading it, waiting for relief to flood in. It didn't. Instead, I felt empty. I'd been living in crisis mode for so long that when the emergency ended, there was a hollow space where panic used to live. No one warns you about that part. About how survival can become its own kind of structure, and when it's gone, you have to build something new in its place. That was when I started cleaning. Not just tidying. Purging, closets, drawers. Boxes in the garage we hadn't opened in years. Every object seemed to carry weight now. A sweater he used to wear. A receipt from a vacation that suddenly felt staged. A birthday card with words that now rang differently. All threw some things away. I donated others. A few I kept, not because they were happy, but because they were real. One afternoon, buried beneath old tax files, I found a notebook. Not financial. Personal. Mark's handwriting again. Less careful this time, more rushed. Pages of thoughts. Doubts. Panic. Late-night entries filled with calculations and fear and self-recrimination. He'd written about shame. About not wanting to disappoint me. Not believing he could fix things if he just tried harder. I sat on the floor and read until my legs went numb. I could see it then. Not an evil man. Not a monster. Just a man who made a mistake and then another and then another. Until the lie felt safer than the truth. Understanding that didn't excuse what he'd done. But it loosened something inside me. I wasn't crazy for not seeing it sooner. He'd worked very hard to make sure I didn't. My daughter came over one evening not long after. She stood awkwardly in the doorway, her coat still on, eyes uncertain. "I don't know how to talk about him anymore," she said. I understood that too well. "You don't have to," I told her. "You don't owe anyone a single version of him." She sat down, twisting her hands together. "I keep thinking about all the times he told me not to worry. That Dad had it handled, that he knew best." I nodded. That was his way. "It made me feel safe," she said. "And stupid both." I reached for her hand. "Trust doesn't make you stupid, it makes you human," she cried then. The deep sobs she'd held back for months. I held her and let her. This time, I didn't try to fix it. I didn't offer reassurance or explanations. I just stayed. The job at the bookstore started as a necessity. A way to bring in money. Something to anchor my days. But slowly it became something else. People talked to me there, strangers. About books, yes, but also about their lives. Their worries. Their quiet fears. One woman lingered at the counter one afternoon, pretending to browse. Finally, she leaned in and asked softly, "Do you ever feel like you don't really know the person you're married to?" The question landed like a bell. "Yes," I said. "I have." She nodded, relief flooding her face. "Everyone tells me I'm lucky. That my husband handles everything. That I should be grateful." I looked at her carefully. "Are you?" She hesitated. "I don't know. That matters," I said. That not knowing. She left with a book she didn't really want, but she looked lighter somehow. Like someone who'd been given permission to trust her instincts. That happened more and more. Stories whispered between shelves. Confessions made over the counter. Women who felt small for wanting transparency. Ashamed for wanting to understand their own finances. Afraid of what they might find if they looked too closely. I never told them what to do. I just told them what happened when I didn't look. At night, alone in the house, I started doing something else I'd never done before. I planned. Not retirement fantasies, not vague hopes. Actual plans. Modest ones, achievable on how to track my expenses. How to build credit again. How to ask questions without apologizing. I met with a financial advisor who spoke to me like an equal, not a liability. Every small step felt like reclaiming ground. Some days the anger returned without warning. Sharp and sudden. I'd be washing dishes or folding laundry and it would hit me, the audacity of what Mark had done. The arrogance of deciding for both of us. The cowardice of leaving me to clean it up. On those days I let myself feel it. I didn't dress it up, I didn't soften it. Anger, I learned, is information. It tells you where your boundaries were crossed. And mine had been obliterated. Other days I felt sad for him. For the man who'd been so afraid of failure that he chose deception. For the husband who loved me but didn't trust me enough to be honest. Both feelings lived in me now. I stopped trying to make one erase the other. On the anniversary of his death, I went to the ocean alone. I stood at the water's edge, the wind sharp against my face, and I spoke out loud. "I wish you'd told me," I said. The waves answered back, indifferent and endless. I could have helped. I didn't cry, I didn't forgive. I just acknowledged the truth of it. Then I turned and walked away. That was the moment I understood something important. Closure isn't something someone gives you. It's something you decide to stop chasing. Months later, when someone asked me if I missed being married, I surprised myself with my answer. "I miss partnership," I said. Not marriage, not kinship. Real partnership doesn't hide. It doesn't manage you. It doesn't decide what you can handle. It stands beside you. Even when things are messy. Especially then. I still keep the letter Mark wrote. Not because it absolves him. Not because it comforts me. Because it reminds me of the cost of silence. And every time I log into my bank account, every time I sign my name, every time I ask a question without fear, I am reminded of something else too. I survived the truth. And that truth, painful as it was, gave me my life back. There was a morning, months later, when I realized I'd slept through the night. No dreams. No jolting awake. No rehearsing conversations that would never happen. Just rest. It startled me more than the nightmares ever had. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of the house. And for the first time I wasn't waiting for something bad to happen. The silence didn't feel like a pause before disaster. It felt like space. I made coffee and stood at the kitchen window watching the sun rise over the neighbor's roof. The light hit the counter in the same way it always had. But everything felt subtly different, like a room after furniture has been rearranged. Familiar, but finally aligned. That day at the bookstore. Ruth watched me for a while before speaking. "You're standing differently," she said. I laughed. "What does that mean?" "It means you're not bracing anymore." I hadn't realized how much of my life had been spent bracing. For surprises. For corrections, for explanations. For reassurance that everything was under control. Control had been the illusion all along. The support group started quietly. Just 4 women at first. Folding chairs in the back room. A pot of coffee that tasted like regret, and a silence thick with shared fear. No one knew how to begin. So I did. I told them about the safe smile Mark used when he said, "Don't worry." About how comforting it sounded. About how expensive it became. I didn't dramatize it, I didn't soften it either. One woman stared at the floor the entire time. Another cried openly. One sat very still, hands clenched in her lap. When I finished, no one spoke for a moment. Then the woman who hadn't looked up said, "I thought I was crazy." We met again the next month. Then again. Stories poured out slowly at first, then all at once. Hidden accounts. Gambling debts. Crypto investments. Loans taken, that no one else knew about. The patterns were chillingly similar. Love mixed with secrecy. Protection twisted into control. No one in that room had married a villain. They'd married men who told them not to worry. One evening after the group ended, a woman stayed behind. She was younger than me, early 40s maybe, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. "He says I'm bad with money," she said. "That I'd just stress myself out if I knew." I felt something steady rise in me. "That's not kindness," I said gently. "That's dismissal." "But what if he's right?" "Then you learn," I said. "You don't disappear." She nodded, tears slipping down her face. Watching these women felt like watching versions of myself at different moments in time. Before the letter. Before the phone calls. Before the unraveling. I wished I could reach back and shake my younger self. Tell her to ask one more question. Open one more statement. Trust that discomfort was a message, not a flaw. But regret is a poor teacher. Presence is better. My children changed too. My son became more cautious, more deliberate. He talked openly with his wife about finances now. Showed her everything. Not because he was afraid, but because he understood how easy it is to mistake silence for safety. My daughter grew sharper. Less willing to accept vague answers. She once told me, "I think I loved the version of Dad who didn't exist." I told her, "You loved the version he showed you. That love was real. It just wasn't the whole truth." She nodded. We were learning to hold complexity together now. On what would have been my wedding anniversary, I didn't mark the day. No candle, no sadness ritual, no forced reflection. I worked a full shift. I laughed with Ruth. I came home and cooked a simple dinner. Later, I realized that was the truest sign of healing. The day didn't own me anymore. I opened a new savings account that week. Nothing dramatic. Just a small, deliberate act. My name only. My decisions. My responsibility. I sat at the bank desk as the teller slid the paperwork toward me. "Do you want overdraft protection?" she asked. I smiled. "I want visibility." She didn't understand what I meant, but I did. There are still moments when something catches me off guard. A financial commercial promising peace of mind. A couple at a restaurant laughing over a budget spreadsheet. A phrase someone says casually, "My spouse handles all that." I don't interrupt them, I don't warn them unless they ask. But inside, I hope they listen to the small voice that says, "Look closer." The house feels different now. Not emptier, quieter in a good way. I rearranged the furniture. Painted the walls, planted something new in the garden where Mark used to insist roses were too much trouble. They bloomed anyway. Sometimes I think about the woman I was before all of this. The one who equated trust with silence. Who believed love meant not questioning. Who thought peace came from letting go. I don't judge her. She did the best she could with the information she had. but I wouldn't trade places with her now. This version of me knows how to stand alone without being lonely. Knows how to ask without apologizing. Knows that love doesn't require blindness. If someone ever tells my story, I hope they don't frame it as tragedy. It was a loss. Yes, but it was also an awakening. I didn't lose everything when my husband died. I lost an illusion, and in its place I gained myself.